Well, dear friends, welcome back to the second lecture of the series. Yesterday, we tried to lay before you the problem of the financial crisis, and today we are going to deal with the theory which has been given to the agrarian crisis, as well as one of the major results of this crisis, the revolts which occurred. These are the two aspects which we would be dealing with today. Now, the crisis which was occurring, the paucity which was occurring during the first decades of Aurangzeb's reign, as I mentioned yesterday, they are being mentioned by a number of primary sources. The Persian sources do not say so in so many words that there was a crisis, but they do inform about the reactions to what happened to the crisis. These steps which were taken by the state, whether in the form of administrative measures or in the form of issuance of farmans. One of the major source from which we come to know about what actually was happening and a direct report of what actually took place during the reign of Aurangzeb, especially during the first decade of his reign, is reported by Francois Bernier. Now, I have discussed Bernier with you before. Bernier, Francois Bernier, who is also known as Monsieur Bernier, was a French scientist, a man of nobility, a man who had been sent to India to report on the scientific developments here. In fact, he has written on a number of you know things related with science regarding the country, the fauna, the flora, the bezoar stone, the type of treatments which were being given to the people who were ill, so on and so forth. He gives mention of all. He is also taken to be the person who introduced the European sciences to the Mughal court. I informed you that soon on coming to India, he had been taken into service by Dara Shikoh. He had been serving Dara Shikoh. He was one of these scholars who was in the court of Dara Shikoh, the so-called Crown Prince. Uh, there, along with Dara, uh, he was carrying out his work side by side with a large number of Brahmins, physicians, scholars, scientists of the Indian origin. Now, if you read, we come to know that uh, Harvey's theory of circulation of blood, for example, was one of the themes which was taken up. Uh, so, in other words, Francois Bernier was dealing with a number of topics related with science. Now, if you look at his uh, memoirs, which survive in the form of letters written to some of the nobles, for example, to Colbert, who had sponsored his trip to India, Bernier, apart from giving all these details and scientific details, also gives much information about the country where he was living at the moment. His account gives a description of Persia through which he had passed. He describes India, especially the main towns of India, for example, Delhi and Agra. They are picked up. The education system of the country, what type of schools, madrasas, pathshalas were there, for example, at Banaras or in Agra or in Delhi. What type of society was there? What type of polity existed during the period? Almost all the fields are taken up for the comment by Francois Bernier. He is introducing the country to the nobility of France. And as I said yesterday, it was a European perspective, or more especially the French perspective towards India, which gets reflected in what Bernier has to tell us about. Now, he gives very perceptive comments. He looks at the larger picture, and as a true scientist, he does not even only give what he saw, but he also tried to deal with the causes and effects. Why certain things were happening? What was the reason for that? In a purely scientific manner. And thus we find that when Bernier, after having served Dara Shikoh and after the War of Succession, after Dara had lost the battle, after he had been killed by Aurangzeb, Francois Bernier was forced to join the service of Aurangzeb, and for quite some time, although reluctantly, Bernier was serving Aurangzeb. So whether it was the period of Shah Jahan while he was serving Dara, or the period of Aurangzeb when Bernier was now very much in the service of of Aurangzeb, what we find is that Bernier is observing the polity, the society, the Mughal elites, the Mughal culture at a very close hand. Unlike, for example, Manucci. Manucci was observing everything from the bazaar, from the market. He was giving a common man's perspective. But Francois Bernier, whether it was during the reign of Shah Jahan or whether it was the reign of Aurangzeb, was in the inner coterie of and having the privilege of looking at the Mughal Empire from within. He was also observing the rot which was taking place. He had seen what was the situation under Shah Jahan. And now he was observing what was happening during the reign of Aurangzeb. He could perceive that there was negativity. There was a decline which was taking place. The Mughal Empire, the society, the economy, the economic conditions, the prevalent atmosphere was all heading towards the south. It was going down. And thus, while he describes the Mughal Empire or the country where he was serving to his French masters, he also mentions this phenomena of decline. He not only mentions this phenomena of decline, but goes on to give his views why this decline was taking place. Now, one of the things which Francois Bernier mentions very explicitly is the fact that the Jagirdari system was the main cause for what was happening. In the perception of Bernier, it was the problems in the Jagirdari system, which were responsible. He thought that the fact that the Jagirdars were being transferred quite frequently was the main cause of all the problems which were occurring in the country. He felt that as the Jagirdar was not sure whether he would be there in his Jagir the next year to collect the taxes, the Jagirdar was in a hurry to collect all his dues at the very moment. He was not giving any concessions. He was acting very, very regressive. The Jagirdar, according to Bernier, knew that if he gave concessions, if he excused the peasants from giving the taxes at the moment, he or his descendants may not ever be able to collect the dues. Francois Bernier mentions that not only the fact that Jagirdar was not permanent, but he was also non-hereditary. He knew that once transferred, even his progeny, his children, were not going to benefit from it. And thus, he had no sympathy for the peasants. Either he would collect all the taxes just now, or it would be he who would be at a loss because next year there would be somebody else who would be doing the collection and he would be missing out. And the result of this, according to Bernier, the result of the Jagirdar being transferable, the result of Jagirdar being non-hereditary, the result of both these things was the ruination of the peasants. This he said was true not only for the Mughal Empire, but in fact, he's not looking only at the Mughal Empire. He's talking about the East. In fact, as I said, that he is looking at a larger picture. Having come from Europe, he divides the world into two. He says that uh, there were two types of pre-colonial states. One, the Oriental monarchies, in which includes the Mughals as well as the Ottomans, the Turkish Empire, the Safavids. So he takes all these three together. He says that these are the Oriental monarchies, the monarchies of the Orient, which, in his views, were very different from the European monarchies, which were Occident. Occident. So, on the one hand, you had Occidental empires, on the other hand, you had the Oriental empires. The Occidental empires were the Western empires, from where he belonged, and the Oriental empires were the empires of the East. And there was a great division between the East and the West, between the Orient and the Occident. According to Bernier, the difference between the Occidental empires and the Oriental empires was twofold. One, he tried to argue that in the Orient, the king was the owner of the soil. And thus, he was extracting the rent. It was not the land revenue, because the ultimate owner in the Orient was the king, the monarch. So you don't take revenues from your own place, you collect the rent. The peasant was paying rent to the king. On the other hand, as far as the Occidental empires were concerned, Europe was concerned, the West was concerned, there was a tax which was being collected. In the European Oriental or the European or the Occidental empires, what you had were the nobles who were hereditary and non-transfer. They could not be transferred just like those in India, in the Mughal Empire, or in the Ottoman Empire, or in the Safavids. They were the lords. And the lords were collecting the revenues. The temporary tenure of the Indian nobility or the Jagirdars was the main cause, which led to an over exploitation of the peasant. And the over exploitation led to a progressive decline in economy as well as in the polity. In Europe, because the situation was different, there was dominance of private property, there was protection, which led to progress and prosperity. The Occidental empires, in his view, were laissez-faire empires. The Oriental empires were despotic empires. And that is why he talks about, or that large number of scholars talk about Oriental despotism. The Mughal monarch was a despot, and he was practicing despotism. In France, the king was absolute but benevolent. The lords in Europe were permanent, hereditary. Their interests were within the land, and thus their treatment of their territory, of their people, was much better than what the treatment of the transferable, non-hereditary Mansabdars and Jagirdars was, for example, in India. In other words, almost all the problems in the Orient were due to this particular nature of the Jagirdari system. On the face of it, this theory appears very attractive. All of us know naturally that when a person was appointed as the Jagirdar, he did not have any permanent interest in that particular area. He was there for probably 2-3 years, or at the most 5 years. From day one, he knew that he would be transferred. He would be sent somewhere else. And this territory, which he was holding temporarily, would pass on into the hands of somebody else. So it's very natural to imagine that no long-term measures would be taken by such a Jagirdar. Why would I invest so much at a place whose fruits I'm not going to eat? If I sow something now, the fruits of my labor would be enjoyed by somebody else. So why should I labor? Why should I give concessions? Why should I do something on a long term? My interest, because I know that I would be here for a year or two, at the most 3-4 years, my interest would be very, very temporary. I would try to exploit as much as possible. Irfan Habib has also argued that the Mughal Empire was a very exploitative empire, basing on the same thing. He derives much of it from what Francois Bernier has been saying. So it appears to be very, very logical. To an extent, Bernier is correct. But we would see that in totality, what Bernier is telling us may not be wholly factual. In fact, the problem with Monsieur Bernier was that he was heavily obsessed and prejudiced with the sanctity of the European thought. He thought, he was obsessed, in fact, to the level of obsession, that the right to private property was something which was very important. And because there was no right to property in India, as there was in Europe or in France, he finds faults with the Indian situation. He lays all the blame on the Mughal Jagirdari system. It's a fact that to some extent, the Jagirdari system was irresponsible. But then, if you have studied what the Jagir system is, you would realize that it would be a fallacy to think that the Jagir system was equivalent to a feudal system. Jagir system was not a feudal system at all. I mean, the historians of the Aligarh school, for example, Professor M. Athar Ali, Professor Satish Chandra, Irfan Habib, they have all tried to define or look at the Jagir system from a different angle. And when you look at the work of Professor M. Athar Ali, for example, if you look at his work, if you look at the definition which he has tried to give, the Mughal Jagir system was, in his view, bureaucratic feudalism. What is this? Remember that to be a Jagirdar, a person had to be a Mansabdar. A feudal lord, on the other hand, had to be a hereditary lord. Who was a Mansabdar? Mansabdar was a person who was non-hereditary, who got his mansab on the basis of some qualification. And his rise in mansab would be as per his experience which he was gaining. It was not that a Panj Hazari Mansabdar, a Mansabdar of 5,000, his son would also become a Mansabdar of 5,000. No. Number one, it was not necessary that a Mansabdar's son would also become a Mansabdar. Number two, if he would be given a Mansab, it would start from the base. And then, as per the rise in his qualifications, his experience, the Mansab would gradually keep on increasing. Right? So it was quite possible that a person whose Mansab was 5,000, his son, if ever appointed, would be holding a Mansab of 500. He may end up to be a Mansabdar of 5,000, that's another matter. But in European condition, the son of a hereditary lord would be a lord. And he would be the lord of a similar position. In India, a person would have to prove his worth to gain the mansab, the number of mansab he was holding. Without proving his fault, he could not be a mansabdar, and without proving his worth, he could never get his mansab enhanced. And if he was not a mansabdar, he could not be a jagir. And that is why a jagirdar was more akin to a bureaucrat within inverted commas. He was not the hereditary lord. Now, this is a fact which Bernier could never understand. And secondly, could never appreciate. To him, he was used to seeing lords who were permanent, who were hereditary, and the French Empire was flourishing because of these lords. So whatever he found contrary to what he had experienced in the Occident, in France, he thought that those were the things which were responsible for the decline in the, because whether it was the Jagir system of India or the Timar system of the Ottoman Empire or the equivalent system which was there under the Safavids, all the three systems in Oriental empires were almost similar. The Oriental empires were almost similar to each other. They were non-hereditary, they were non-permanent, they were transferable, and very different from the European position. Now, to the Indians and to the Mughals, this very character of the Jagir and Mansab system was the basic strength of the Mughal. Abul Fazl, for that matter, if you read his works at Barnama, if you read Ain Akbari, Abul Fazl points out that as transplantation is good for the health of the plant, the transfer of Jagirs is absolutely for the health of the administrative system. What Bernier is telling us is totally contrary to that. Abul Fazl was right. In fact, we find that till the Jagir system, till the Mansab and the Jagir system were intact, the Mughal Empire flourished in its full health. Bernier thought just the opposite. Bernier thought that the very nature of Jagir being transferable, being non hereditary, sowed the seeds of the disintegration of the Mughal. The exploitative nature of the Mughal Empire emanated from this system. Irfan Habib would agree to some extent with this point of view. But let us also not forget that the health of the Mughal Empire also depended on the proper functioning of the system. The pivot in this whole system was the emperor. Till his position was intact, until he was able to control the Jagirdars, the exploitative nature of the Jagir system did not harm the Mughal administration. There were checks and balances on the position of the Jagirdars. We see, if you read Akbarnama, if you read the sources of Jahangir's period, if you read the sources of Shah Jahan's period, we come to know that whenever the Jagirdar would exceed his limit, he would be punished. Remember that in the Jagir system, there was the provision of the resumption of Jagirs. The threat of resumption was very much there. The escheat system was very much there. Although seldom practiced, but in theory, it was the king to whom everything would belong in the case of the death of a noble. We know that it was only in a few cases that the escheat system was invoked, but there was, one can say that the checks and balances which were put up by the position of the powerful monarch, um, you know, saw to it that the equilibrium was maintained. It was in 1681, after Aurangzeb crossed over to the Deccan, that the equilibrium which was being maintained got diminished, and the crisis resulted. We know that Frank Perlin, for example, has argued that the introduction of the Marathas caused the equilibrium to disappear. Shivaji and the rise of Shivaji, and ultimately the involvement of Aurangzeb in the Deccan against the Marathas, led to a situation in which the Jagirdars gained much power, and very soon their exploitation reached to a position where the flight of peasantry, where the economic exploitation of the zamindars at the hands of Jagirdars, the exploitation of the peasants, etc., increased to much level. Now, whatever the reason may be, whether the Jagir system was responsible for the decline of the Mughal Empire or not, whether Francois Bernier was totally correct in his theory or not, he tried to interpret, as I said, that the decline of the Mughal Empire was because of the Jagir system, because of these inherent weaknesses of the Jagirdar system, because of the exploitative nature which was inherent in this Jagirdar system, that led to the decline of the Mughal Empire. Not only to the Mughal Empire, but similar situations prevailed under the Ottomans, similar situations prevailed under the Safavids, and thus all the three empires during the same period of time started declining. That was the position which Bernier had taken up. The theory of Bernier, where the pre-modern states were divided into Oriental and Occidental, and there were certain problems with the Oriental empires, the lack of private ownership, the transferability of the Jagir, the impermanence of the Jagir, which all led to the collapse of the system. Now, whether we totally agree with what Bernier tried to argue or not, but we do find that the reign of Aurangzeb, when all these things were happening, for whatever reasons, there were a large number of reactions to what was happening. No denying the fact. Like M. Athar Ali, I can go on arguing that Bernier was wrong. But if you look at what was happening during the period, there were certain happenings which had not happened before. For example, as I pointed out yesterday and I am pointing out today, that the reign of Aurangzeb from the very beginning experienced the flight of peasantry. How do you explain that? It is explained only by what Bernier has tried to tell us. One may have certain reservations to the theory of Bernier. He may not have been totally correct in that. The Jagiir system may not have been totally negative. Jagiir system may have its positives also. One may agree with Abul Fazl that the Jagiir system was crucially important, and it was crucially important because we know that till the Jagiir system functioned in a healthy way, the empire survived. The moment the you know it started tilting towards more exploitation, the system started collapsing. There was something which kept the Jagiir system in its position till the reign of Shah Jahan. But from the reign of Aurangzeb onwards, something happened when suddenly we find that the economic exploitation started to a larger extent, to a greater extent. As mentioned in my earlier lecture, we did see that, large number of revolts started taking place during the reign of Aurangzeb, which had never occurred before. Secondly, from day one, we find that there was a flight of peasants. The Farman of Rasik Das and Muhammad Hashim are very much there before us, where there is an acceptance that there is a flight, where there is an acceptance that there is a flight of peasantry which is taking place. The peasants are leaving their territories and trying to flee to other places. This whole, phenomena of flight of peasantry, you know, phenomena of flight of peasantry, to the same extent is not found. The same extent is not found in the period of Shah Jahan or Jahangir or Akbar. That starts occurring only in 1660s, and you may say the last 2-3 years of 1650s, 58 onwards, 56 onwards. Flight of peasantry. When there was a flight of peasantry, there was a shortage of collection in revenues. When there was a shortage of collection in revenues, there was a shortage in the income of a large number of people. The peasants suffered. The dual collection of the peasants, so on and so forth. And the result was that almost throughout the empire, a large number of revolts started occurring, which may be said to be revolts by the peasants or by those who were involved in agriculture. The revolts which occurred during this period have been labeled by historians like Irfan Habib as peasant revolts. There are other scholars, for example, people like M. Athar Ali, who have tried to argue that probably they were more in the form of Zamindars' revolts against the exploitation of the Jagirdars. Whether they were the revolts by the peasants or they were the revolts by the Zamindars, the fact remains that these revolts do present a situation where there was something wrong with the agrarian conditions. There were three major revolts which took place during the 17th century. The revolt by the Jats, especially in the Mathura region. The Jats in the Mathura region were led by a person who was a Zamindar, Gokla Jat. He was the Zamindar of around 11 villages. And it was he who led the revolt. In 1669, Gokla Jat suddenly revolted. And because almost all the peasantry, like the Zamindar Gokla, belonged to the community of the Jats, all the Jats aligned themselves together and sided with the Gokla and rebelled against the state. We know that under the Mughals, the Zamindaris were based on the caste system. They were based on the basis of the caste, that in various territories the caste preference was given at the time when the Zamindaris were being assigned. And thus, the whole Mathura region where Gokla Jat had its influence was dominated by a peasantry which was basically Jats, and all of them rose in rebellion against the Mughal administration. The Mughals tried to contain the situation. The Faujdar of Mathura region, along with the Mughal army, it is said that around 20,000 Mughal soldiers under his command, under the Faujdar. The name of the Faujdar was Hassan Ali Khan. Um, he tried to suppress these peasants who were revolting under the leadership of Gokla Jat. After a massive fight, in fact, it is said that around 4,000 Mughal soldiers lost their lives. 5,000 Jats died during the battle. Gokla Jat ultimately was arrested and executed. The rebellion or revolt, whatever it was contained. Naturally, the superiority of the Mughal artillery defeated the rebels. But there is one thing which one should mark. If 5,000 Jats were killed, 4,000 Mughal soldiers were also killed during this rebellion. Almost an equal number. just a difference of 1,000. This had never happened before. You know that the Mughal artillery was quite superior. In spite of that, the peasants, किसान, गांव में खेतों में काम करने वाले, they were able to kill 4,000 soldiers. How was it possible? It was possible because, as Professor Iftidar Alam Khan has argued, that by now the gun and the gunpowder were something which were now available even to the peasants. In fact, Iftidar Alam Khan in his book points out that during this period, when the peasants would be plowing their fields, they would have their guns along with them in the field. अब वो क्रूड रही होंगी, जाहिर है कि they were not as powerful. They must have been matchlocks, still the cruder variety of guns. But after all, they had the guns. Gunpowder was available with the peasants. And the killing of 4,000 Mughal soldiers in the Jat rebellion was possible only with the help of this gun and gunpowder. So it was the technology which was helping the rise of the peasants during this period. Now, as I said, that Irfan Habib has tried to argue that as far as the Jat revolt is concerned, the nature of the Jat revolt was that of a peasant rebellion. M. Athar Ali, on the other hand, has tried to argue that one cannot call it a peasant revolt because it was not the peasants who revolted, it was actually the Zamindar who had revolted. The Zamindar had revolted due to the pressure on him put up by the Jagirdar. So the Jagirdar pressing over the Zamindar as Zamindar became the issue. And the nature of the Jat revolt was that of a Zamindar's rule. The peasants were just following the caste because the Zamindar belonged to their own caste, and that is why all the Jats of the area decided to side with Gokul. Irfan Habib, on the other hand, as I said, pointed out that this was not the case. Why would the peasants give their life only for the caste? He tries to argue that it was basically the exploitation of the peasantry, the regressive taxation, which led the peasants to be dissatisfied. And because Iftar Alam Khan argued that now they had the gun and the gunpowder available, it gave them the opportunity to revolt against the state and to some extent become successful. The second very important revolt which occurred, which also had the same type of nature, which was peasant based, was the revolt of the Satnamis. Satnami was a community, a religious community, living in the regions of Punjab. They were also known as Mundias because they had their heads shaven. They had certain common religious practices. They did not believe in the caste system. They had a feeling of belonging to a community, a feeling of brotherhood amongst themselves. They did not believe in untouchability. So all of them were thought to be equal to each other. And more importantly, all these Mundias or the Sattamis, they were belonging to the so-called lower working classes. They were agriculturists, peasants, petty merchants, petty traders, peddlers. They were very honest in their dealings, but they never bowed down before any pressure. And because of their exploitation and regressive taxation, that all of them rose in self-defense. In 1672, they revolted against the Mughal state. It was basically, once again, a peasant uprising. An uprising of the actual tillers of the land. Some of them were landless laborers. The Satnami Revolt has been discussed in one of the important contemporary sources of the period, Waqiyat-e Mushtaqi. Saqi Mustaid Khan, in fact, describes the type of people who had taken part in this revolt which occurred in 1672. He tells us that all these lower class riffraffs, half-clad peasants, ordinary menial classes, laborers, they assembled together and started the rebellion. The dispute arose with one payada, one particular foot soldier of the Mughal Empire, who was guarding the field, and he misbehaved with one of these Mundias. A number of Sattamis got together, killed this payada soldier. The Faujdar sent an army. They defeated that army. And after defeating this army, they became emboldened and started collecting more and more in number and started moving. The Faujdar was unable to stop the rebellion. The author of the Waqiyat-e Mushtaqi tells us that at this particular moment of time, when the local Mughal army had been defeated, a rumor was spread. होता है ना कि आपके पास आर्म्स है, आर्मामेंट्स है, आपके पास ताकत है, आप तब भी हार जाते हैं, तो आप क्या करते हैं? फिर आप अंधविश्वास का सहारा लेते हैं। हम क्या करें? ये ऊपर वाला कर रहा है, हमने तो पूरी मेहनत लगा दी. So a rumor was floated that it is not our weakness that we were unable to defeat. अरे ये तो एक रिलीजियस कम्युनिटी है, इनके एक को मारिए, एक के कत्ल होने के एक कटे हुए सर से 10 पैदा हो जाते. If you kill one Satnami, 10 would be born from his dead body. And thus, it is difficult to defeat them. And thus, what happened was that the Satnamis kept on coming together. They started marching towards the capital. The Mughal army, which was assembled to go against them, was afraid to fight because of the rumor that if you would kill them, if you kill one, 10 would be born. So there was much, you know, credence given to this type of rumor mongering. The Mughal army was afraid, unable to fight. The Mughal army was afraid, unable to fight. The news was given to Aurangzeb, a man prone to float rumors himself, a man used to use religion for politics himself. अगर इन किसानों ने मजहब का सहारा लिया था ये अफवाह फैलाने में कि हमको मारोगे तो ये हर एक मरने से 10 पैदा होंगे, और बेचारी गलबिल मुगल आर्मी जो थी, जो अनपढ़ जाहिल सोल्जर्स थे, वो भागने लगे थे बजाय फाइट करने के. जाहिर है जब आप लड़िएगा नहीं तो हारिए गई. दे वर रनिंग अवे. घबरा के खबर औरंगजेब को दी गई कि साहब ये है. औरंगजेब मुस्कुराए. He brought out a chit of paper, wrote something on it, gave it to one officer, and asked that officer, ये तावीज है, इसको बांध लेना और अब नहीं मरे, अब पैदा नहीं हो, जाओ लो. Aurangzeb was a man who understood the psychology. खाली पर्चे को कुछ लिख के नेज़े पे बांध दो और लेके जाओ लड़ो. अब जब लड़ोगे तो कुछ नहीं होगा. Now again with the regained confidence, the Mughal army reached the Satnamis where they were. Murtaza Khan Baraha, one of the Sadat Baraha chieftains, he led the army. बड़े कर्रो फर के साथ ताबीज बांध के अब तो अल्लाह भी हमारे साथ है. Naturally, when they fought, भूख मरे. Safi Mustahid Khan says that the ill-fed army, the ill-fed, ill-armed army was now defeated but the fight, according to Safi Mustahid Khan, was as if the war of Mahabharat was being fought. They fought bravely, but they were killed. The Satnami Revolt came to an end. The use of psychology, the use of religion, once again proved effective when used by Armies. The last rebellion, which was having the same nature, was that of the Sikhs, the Nanak Panthis. By this time, the Sikhs were not known as Sikhs, they were known as Nanak Panthis. They were living in the region of Punjab, as to be expected. Just like the Satnamis, it was also a religious sect. They also believed, just like Satnamis, in brotherhood, equality of all, no untouchability, brotherhood and love of each other was the basic faith. And they all believed in one book, Guru Granth Sahib. If you read Guru Granth Sahib, it appears that the language of peasants have been used there. अल्लाह मियाँ के लिए बिल्कुल जैसे एक रेवेन्यू ऑफिसर के लिए टर्म यूज किया जाता है, उस टाइप से उसमें बयान किया गया. Most of the Nanak Panthis at this time were all basically either petty merchants or the peasants. Sayings of Sheikh Farid Ganj Shakar, is part of Guru Granth Sahib, religious scriptures of Sikh. Now, this Sikh community, led by Guru Tegh Bahadur, fought against the Mughal state. We know that Aurangzeb had tried to convert a number of non-Muslims, especially Nanak Panthis in the Kashmir region, to Islam. And it was in reaction to this, trying to convert to Islam, that Guru Tegh Bahadur took up arms. So, in fact, the revolt of the Sikhs was a revolt by the peasants, but the basic cause was religion. The conversion of that particular sect to Islam. So, Sikh revolt में हम ये कह सकते हैं कि यहाँ के ऊपर सिर्फ इसलिए रिवोल्ट नहीं हुआ कि एक्सप्लॉयटेशन ऑफ पेजेंट्री था, लेकिन इसमें मजहब भी मिला हुआ. सत्तामीज भी एक रिलीजियस ग्रुप थे, लेकिन जहां तक सत्तामी रिवोल्ट का सवाल है, वहां कोई रिलीजियस एक्सप्लॉयटेशन नहीं था. लेकिन जो सिख रिवोल्ट हुआ, जो गुरु तेग बहादुर का जो रिवोल्ट है अगेंस्ट औरंगजेब, that had a religious aspect as well, because it was a revolt against the religious policy of Aurangzeb. It was against the fact that Aurangzeb tried to convert certain members of this community, who were peasants, of course, to Islam. And it was as a reaction to that that we find that the revolt took place. The end result was that Guru Tegh Bahadur was defeated, he was arrested, and in 1665 he was executed. So by 1665, the Sikh revolt came to an end with the execution of Guru Tegh Bahadur, which may be taken as a religious persecution by Aurangzeb against a growing religious order. There were other Afghan rebellions also which took place during the reign of Aurangzeb, but those revolts are in fact have nothing to do with the agrarian conditions. They are tribal revolts, and I would suggest that I have put up a blog which I have shared on the Facebook as well. You Google for it, where the Afghan rebellions, Yusuf Zai's rebellion, um, um, and the Afridi rebellion, both these rebellions I have written a blog on that. So for more information on this, uh, so for more information on this, uh, I won't be dealing both these rebellions here, as I said. Won't be dealing both these rebellions here, as I said, because both these rebellions have nothing to do with presence or with the financial crisis or regulatory crisis which was occurring during the period of arms. Now, with this, we come to an end. If there are any questions or any queries, please do get back to me, WhatsApp me, send me by message any questions, any queries which you have, and we would be meeting with another topic certainly tomorrow, same time, around 6 in the evening, or around 5 in the evening, 5 to 6, we would be meeting again for another set of lectures on yet another theme. Thank you very much.